Hello, all. I was just finishing up some notes on today's topic, which is something that I've experienced and many that I get to work with. So, it's this idea that when you start to dig into personal development and all this work, and for me, it wasn't until like 15 years down the road when I picked up Pete Walker's Complex PTSD, Surviving to Thriving, a few years ago, and really had a name to put on a lot of confusion that can go on, and a lot of confusion that can pop up as you are learning how to relate to people in your life, whether that is kids or partners or friends or some of those tricky relational things that pop up that we all experience. So, what is complex PTSD? Complex PTSD is a name for, unlike PTSD, which is known for almost like a shock trauma or a big event that happens one time potentially, or is more of a shock to the system, versus complex PTSD is really looking at the chronic, ongoing, kind of long-term things that happen. So, from my occupational therapy background and now doing coaching with nervous system regulation, we're really looking at, okay, this is something that shows up when we have repeated experiences where things are happening that are too much for our nervous system to handle. So, trauma, and there are many different definitions for this, but trauma is really looking at, it isn't so much what happens to us, it's mostly really what happens that our nervous system cannot handle alone. So, what happens that our nervous system can't make sense of? We don't have a witness to what we're experiencing. We don't have the capacity to really understand in a way that allows us to move through it and move beyond it and show up to life without all of those impacts. So, complex PTSD really changes our brain structure. This can happen from things like emotional unavailability, and this can be intentional or it can be more intentional, so like neglect, or things where an adult is not available, an adult is not around. And what happens from that, or if an adult is always around being critical or punitive, or when they are present, it's more of a shaming, disconnected relationship versus that connected warmth that we really need as kids. What happens is that we don't cultivate relational safety. So, what I mean by relational safety is that we don't cultivate this ability to feel like, oh, I can exhale, I can be with you, I can rest. It's a psychological rest that really comes from being with somebody who is non-judgmental, who will kind of more unconditionally support, or even, in a good enough way. None of this is about being perfect and getting it right every time, but it's really understanding that this person has my best interest at heart. The underlying intention is to connect and to have a relationship with me, and there is a built-up community or environment of trust here. So when we don't have that, we disconnect from who we are at the core. We disconnect from ourselves, we disconnect from the people around us. Our brain structure changes to look at the world a whole different way. So we really lose this clarity of understanding emotion in the body and feeling safe and secure through that emotion. So the way that I define this with all of these different modalities or things that guide my practice and the work that I do is, can we feel secure no matter what is coming up in our body, in our emotional world? Even if it feels uncomfortable or painful or difficult, doesn't mean we never struggle. It means that we feel secure, or we know that we can ask for help. So let's talk about now ways that complex PTSD can look in life, and some of these may really surprise you. So when we're thinking about the symptoms or the ways it impacts, I think about 3 different categories: mental, physical, and relational. And we could break these down in all kinds of different ways, but really when I start to think about complex PTSD, it's this mental kind of confusion or feeling stuck or feeling detached. It can feel as far as dissociated. So like you're kind of moving through the world in a fog, or there's like a layer, a veil between you and the present moment, the people in your life. It can feel like this overall confusion or distraction, difficulty paying attention. So attention and regulation go hand in hand. So when we are regulated, when we feel secure in our body and experiences and emotions and things that come up, we feel more like we're able to attend. And this is the same with young kids to adults. If we feel on edge, insecure, like there is a threat, like we're bracing for something to come, it can be really tricky to pay attention because our body is shutting down and saying, okay, here's what I need to focus on. Here are the main things that I need to do. Breathe, maybe heart rate, those really core ways of being, and it might shut down the other ways. So we're kind of always in this constant worry about the future, fixation about the past, instead of being right where our 2 feet are in this moment, sitting here talking with you. It might feel like my mind is all over the place, or maybe worried about what others are thinking, worried about who's judging me, worried about what somebody said earlier, what I said earlier. So it's this almost like a rumination or this anxiety that can show up, and a mental state of not being in the present moment. Another way mental can present is feeling either superior or inferior to others. So instead of just being all on the same playing field where we are human, we are fallible, we make mistakes, we have gifts, we have talents that are unique to us, we have challenges that are unique to us, we are human, just like everybody else, no matter the appearance, the facade, the accolades, the achievements, the stuff, we are human. Complex PTSD tricks us into thinking that we need to be different in some way. So when maybe we need to be special to stand out, it feels threatening to be human because that means we might not get our needs met. That means we might not have gotten resources. So this tends to be, maybe you learned that you need to be achieving, doing, performing to get love, to get needs met. And how that can show up later in life is that you need to have a superiority. You need to be special. You need to be different from others. The flip side of that, and there are often flip sides of this at the extreme ends, of course, you might fall anywhere along that spectrum or bounce between the 2 ends. But the other side is feeling inferior to others. So feeling like you don't have gifts to share. Feeling like your self-worth, your self-esteem is in the tank. And this could also show up as overachieving and performing, to have self-worth is in the tank, in either direction. But really it's this idea that everybody else's life is somehow richer, more meaningful, they're doing cool things. This comes in when you downplay all of your achievements. And this is something that I think I could relate to. It's like consistently being on to the next thing and not really noticing that, wow, that was a neat thing that I did. Or, wow, that did impact people. That did really benefit people's lives, the thing that I shared. It could become really easy to kind of detach from that and consider it luck or consider it, the algorithm, or kind of blame it on something else instead of, no, that was really powerful. This kind of, and I'll say God-led gift, but whatever your higher purpose of living is, that was really cool that I was able to funnel that through me and impact others. And that's just something that humans do. It doesn't mean I'm special. It doesn't mean I'm different. It doesn't mean that I'm inferior. It means that we're all here to share gifts and to make mistakes that hopefully expand our heart and grow us. And this is just a human thing. It's not an us thing. So c-ptsd can tell us that this is a me problem. This isn't something that I need to fix. It's something that I did wrong. There's often an overwhelming amount of guilt and shame and this kind of on edge sympathetic nervous system threat that is picking up and saying, I'm not okay just to rest in who I am now. I'm not okay to rest in what I'm doing. Overall, arching is I'm not okay. So next is relational. This is where, again, we feel this disconnect from people around us. There isn't a sense that people are safe, people are secure, people want to help. There's a sense maybe that I'm a burden. Or on the flip side of that, it might be I need to manipulate, I need to lie, I need to be dishonest, or I need to be taking advantage of others in order to get my needs met. Instead of just prioritizing connection and relationship and understanding that that is the reason we're here. And this is where we get our meaning in life. So there's a big difficulty relying on others, asking others for things, not trusting yourself. Maybe you are acting, wearing a mask or acting almost to be liked, to fit in, to get approval. And it's really seeking approval versus authenticity. So approval versus connection. This is where we may see your tendency to be or feel responsible. So if ever anyone is around you, if ever anyone around you is upset, you immediately think, what did I do wrong? This must be about me, taking it personally. It's kind of this, and I'll say kind of this tendency or this older part of ourselves that is popping up, and realizing that as kids, we are egocentric and we think everything revolves around us. So if somebody's upset, if a parent is upset, if a teacher is upset, we think, if I can be better, I can make this outcome more ideal for me, or I can control this in some way. So it's really looking at, where are we still having some of those old wounded parts that are kind of emotionally immature in ways, and we all have ways or behaviors that are emotionally immature, so getting to know these can be really powerful. And recognizing that, oh, I'm not responsible to manage others' emotions. I can trust them as a fully grown adult. I can trust that they can share if something is wrong. I can trust that they can share their needs. Or I can check in and say, hey, I have a story that you're upset with me. What's going on? Is that the case? Is this true? And of course, part of this is finding relationships that feel non-judgmental, that feel trustworthy. Just looking through my notes here to see if I missed anything for that. Relational. So it's really this sense of responsibility often, or detachment from it altogether. Next, we'll talk about physical. So physical is one of the first places that I started to realize, wow, I am holding something in my body. So physical symptoms like chronic fatigue, unexplained symptoms that show up, getting kind of like this unexplained tension or always bracing for something. You might not feel stress on the outside, but then when you start to connect with the body, and this is something in my own path, as I started to become aware of my body and more connected with my emotion and more in tune, I started to realize that, wow, I feel like a tension, that I'm bracing for something in this protective way that tells me that my body isn't feeling so secure. So again, just resting in that being, it feels like there is something that I need to be bracing or protecting against. So this can look like difficulty regulating our state. I do a lot of work on our arousal states and our affect and what that looks like, or how that shows up with our mood. So maybe you're one that needs to be constantly running on adrenaline. Do, go, go, go. And if you don't, it feels almost like you collapse. So this is really common with complex PTSD. And it isn't as much about the diagnosis at all or the label, although hopefully it is validating if you're connecting with this. It's looking at these behaviors and how it shows up and becoming aware of it. So, wow, I started to notice that, yeah, adrenaline feels really good to me, and my body would pump up the cortisol and I could go, go, go and do a lot, and that felt really good. It felt safe to be that way. So this is a really big thing that wears on your body physically over time, is when we're running on adrenaline versus running on joy, interest, desire to do something. It's kind of a fear-driven response. Now, on the other side of that might look like collapsing, or somebody that is procrastinating, somebody that kind of really gets distracted all the time, can't pay attention, loses focus, can't seem to complete any goals, or really do what you have desired in your mind. So it's this shows up as underachieving, or this like there's no middle ground between the go, go, go and the collapse. It's not that modulated middle ground of resting and being and restoring and moving through life in a way that feels clear and energy regulated. It feels like we're kind of bouncing between the two extremes, or we're going to one end because that feels safe and kind of living there. So it's not true safety, it's the pseudo safety that we create because we don't have access to that relational pathway. So if you are recognizing that, wow, you are relating to a lot of these, as I'm wrapping up this list here, I think this point about we lose access to the social pathway that is the most healthy human way to regulate. Meaning, we have a community around us that can mirror back to us non-judgment and support. And when we're feeling something on the inside, we can share, we can feel, we can express in these modulated ways, and then move through it. So, research shows, Jill Bolte Taylor, is that emotion takes between 30 and 90 seconds to move through. So when we have this social pathway developed, we've built in all these experiences feeling like, okay, I can be upset and I can share with somebody, I can ask for help. And in that, we develop this ability to feel secure in ourselves, feel our self-worth, feel our purpose, feel our connection to others, and ultimately how we'll give back to this world. What is our meaning on earth? What is the purpose? What does our time here mean? And how will we live in this way that feels meaningful and rich? Doesn't mean there will never be any challenges or struggles or pain, but it means that we ultimately feel secure enough to navigate that and cope with that. So what to do if we are recognizing this? A lot of this kind of what to do I've woven into our talk today. So being aware is huge. So again, not thinking this is a you problem. This is not a you problem. This is really more and more common, and the more that are aware, the more common it becomes. So awareness is a beautiful thing because it keeps us from that shame or isolation of feeling I am the only one. Reconnecting in safe ways, so things that build safety and security to our nervous system. And this can look different for everyone, so I'll talk about it based on my experience and recognize that this may look very different based on your experience. For me, it was years of awareness. I did tons of reading, and while that can be intellectualizing or spiritualizing, I really took in a lot of information to look at my life from a different lens and look at my behavior from a different view. So when you're reading, when you're learning, when you're watching this video today, you're building awareness that could change your life forever. And hopefully for the nervous system, we're doing this in gradual small shifts. So after years of kind of awareness and kind of keeping it to myself, I started to grow into community more. So I started to notice how things like movement or, stretching, I was going to yoga at the time, but movement and connection with the body can really influence that. So there are all these ways that, reconnecting with the body in a safe, secure way can show up and be really helpful and really connecting to restore some of that safety from the body. Next, I also really recommend some support. So whether that is a counselor, a therapist, for me that was a recovery center, a group where you can share and it's not judgmental. And people talk about big things that maybe outside of the recovery room might seem taboo or too much, or like you're not sure if people can handle it. But in that recovery room, I heard some of the most painful things, and I continue to see the most wise, brilliant people with open hearts because of the experiences that they've moved through. And it's this free, accessible, really all walks of life, people coming together for this purpose of healing. So a community, like I was still part of Adult Children of Alcoholics and Dysfunctional Families, and you can watch meetings online, you can listen in. So anytime you're having a hard time, an emotional flashback or a c-ptsd kind of trigger comes up, you can log on and hear other people talking through their stories, building this reconnection with the body. And it's this really accessible way to grow. And more this program is getting insight about the nervous system and the body and restoring that. So I think there's a lot of criticism about the recovery world and not being trauma informed, and that just isn't the case in many rooms today, where they are getting more and more knowledge. And definitely depends on where you go and which group you're in, and I recommend that you try 6 different meetings before you find a home meeting that you want to go to consistently to really feel out what feels best for you. But know that it is possible to change. So even if you don't have access to therapy or counseling and things like EMDR, body-based therapy, internal family systems, really finding a therapist that is trauma informed from a nervous system lens, I think is super important. So versus just trying to control your thoughts or shift your thoughts, which can be helpful for many, the c-ptsd really lives in the reactions in our body. And our wounds are stored as reactions. Our reactions are showing up in behavior. So it is possible to heal. You can grow, you can shift. The brain is malleable and the body is shifting and changing every day. So our wounding and our hurt shows up in reactions, and so does our healing. So stick around if you want to hear more on this. Comment with questions, thoughts that you have. I would love to hear what you think and what you would like to see in the future. And subscribe, and I will see you next time.